Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Great American Story. I'm Ron Hoon, and we love spending time with you. When I say we, I'm talking about this guy right here, John Netzel. He is the creator of The Great American Story. And John, we just see more, we get more feedback. We see a growing number of people really looking forward to every episode we do.
Yeah, it's neat because this is an open book.
Yes.
There's so many different topics that we get to share about and learn about, and it's an education, I know, for you as well as me. And this week is, I'll be honest with you, I didn't know a whole lot about this. I have never been to an event that we're about to talk about, which is the World's Fair.
We are going to be talking World's Fair.
I know you have, and you have fond memories of it, but kind of a little bit of a forgotten pastime, maybe, so to speak. Something
yes.
Right? I mean, it doesn't really exist in its form that it did back in the, early 20th century up till the 21st century.
I mean, you go back to, say, just the 1960s.
Yes.
You had Seattle, and then right after that, you had New York. And you had cities around the world that were competing. And then all of a sudden, after about the mid-1980s, they really just kind of faded away.
Yeah, 84 was the last one in America.
Yes.
And now they've
How fun would that one have been? That's
no
New
doubt.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that would have been great,
crazy, right?
Yes.
But now they've turned into these expos, these that really aren't on these grand stages like they used to be. So it was kind of neat to kind of dig into yesteryear and look at how countries would represent themselves across the global stage.
Let's start at the very beginning,
absolutely.
Which is a very good place to start. To quote some line from a movie.
We're going back to the 19th century, right?
Yes, we are. Yeah. And so it's interesting because if you go to, there's an area of London that to this day they call Albertopolis. And they actually kind of credit Prince Albert himself for getting behind this idea of creating what turned out to be the very first World's Fair.
That's right.
And in its wake, and not all of them were financially successful.
No.
In fact, some of them were financial disasters.
Yeah.
But in its wake, it was interesting because now, all these years later, 150 plus years later, you can go to London and you see the Victoria and Albert Museum.
Oh, no kidding.
Thank you for creating that particular World's Fair. How about the famous British Natural History Museum? Two of the greatest museums in the world that were created that basically came out of this very first one. We go all the way back to the 1850s.
1851, and I think that's one of the neat things about these World's Fairs is they would showcase these amazing structures. I mean, you were talking about the things that were built in London. Mm-hmm. The Eiffel Tower came out of the World's Fair in Paris.
Right.
So you would find these really neat buildings, neat structures that survive even today.
Yes.
Iconic statues, whatever, what may. That were centerpieces of these World's Fairs.
When you really think about it, the competition between great cities and cities that someday wanted to be great was intense.
No
I
doubt.
mean, you mentioned there had actually been, all the way back to Napoleon's times, there had been some, if you want to call them like World's Fairs, but it wasn't until 1851 in London where they said, we can outdo anything they've done in France.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they followed up with they had created the Crystal Palace and everything there, which was amazing.
Yeah.
But then eventually Paris said, we're going to outdo anything you've ever seen. And that's what brought on the Eiffel Tower. But it was the Eiffel Tower that then shocked the rest of the world, and everybody else from that point on said, we've got to be bigger and better and grander. And then Chicago stepped up to the plate. Johnny, we got a lot to talk about.
We do. Chicago was a big one. 1893, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
We had one in 1876 in Philly for the centennial, where the telephone was introduced. And that's kind of the cool thing about these World's Fairs is a lot of things were introduced, a lot of products, a lot of things that we still use today. I mean, 1893, Chicago, the Ferris wheel was the the center, right? That was the centerpiece.
That was their answer to the Eiffel Tower,
it was.
right?
But I mean, think about what else came out of that World's Fair. The zipper.
Okay.
You know, the
Yes.
dishwasher. Let's see, juicy fruit gum.
Yes.
The moving sidewalk. It was the first pedestrian conveyor belt.
Think about that every time you're at the airport and you're on that long moving walkway.
Right? Yeah.
Thank you, Chicago,
Thank you, Chicago
1893. How about that?
And Cracker Jacks. I think I mentioned that. So
Yes.
And you know, the World's Fair in Chicago had there was some trouble as well associated with that. There was a serial killer on the loose in Chicago.
Yeah.
There, you know, and there's a real backstory to that.
Tell us a little bit more about that, John.
Sure.
Now, there was a famous book,
There
Devil
is.
in the White City.
Devil in the White City. It's an Eric Larson book.
Let's
Yep.
go back. Why is it called the White City?
Well, it was because of the architecture and the way
Well, they had like
basically
100,000 light bulbs, and
did.
people are like, actual light bulbs with electricity?
They did, yeah. And I'm just looking through my notes here. The White City, its architecture and layout influenced urban planning for U.S. decades to come. It was this neoclassical masterpiece, you know, and it was just this grand spectacle. And I was reading that 27 million attended that World's Fair that year. And that is 40% of the population back then.
That's
a staggering number if you think about it. 40%.
Go ahead.
Please.
No.
Well, I'm just, you know, considering where Chicago was on the map.
Right.
You're not talking about an East Coast city here. You're talking about the kind of the edge of.
Yeah.
Right?
And guess who got to decide? Congress, where the vast majority of the population is going to be centered on the East Coast. So what happened was you had the World's Fair over there in Paris. You had the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah.
And so the movement was afoot in Washington. And they said, look, we want to do, they're thinking, hey, just like we have our 250th anniversary as a country coming up, they said, look, we're approaching the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus' voyage to America, right? 1492. We've seen what Paris can do. We've got to do it bigger. We got to do more. We got to do it better. And so basically, they invited the major cities of America at the time to compete and try to convince Congress, which Congress can hardly agree on anything.
Yeah, no kidding,
anymore.
right?
Try to get them to come up with the answer for where it was going to be. You had New York, John, as the early leader in the clubhouse.
And you would think that's the natural, right?
Of course. I mean, that's where the money center is. That's where the power is. And pretty much everything was headquartered and centered from the world of politics to money up and down the East Coast, right? From Boston through New York into Philadelphia, which, by the way, Philly had already had their own World's Fair of sorts, which was the 100th anniversary of America. Hard to believe.
Yeah.
Here we are approaching our 250th.
I know, right?
Well, so Chicago, they came up with a plan for how to compete with and beat New York City to win it. And I think it's absolutely fascinating because they pulled out really the biggest names in the business world. Chicago was such a boom town. They got Marshall Field, the famous department store magnate, and he got some of his other buddies, including Philip Armour, the meat packing king, and George Pullman of railroad car fame. And together, then they build this, consortium of leaders. They go to Congress and start lobbying them. And even though they were not the favorite, ultimately they said, we're impressed. We're going to go all the way out to the Midwest.
How about that?
And so while Chicago won, you ended up having all these other states around it that were like, yes, for the first time, we're kind of being recognized, and the world is going to come to the Midwestern part of the USA.
Yeah, and you know, getting back to the craziness of that World's Fair, that book you were mentioning, Eric Larson's Devil in the White City. Right. So there's a serial killer on the loose during that World's Fair. That was, I mean, it was like Silence of the Lambs. The guy had built a house that he would kidnap people in, and was H.H. Holmes was the name. He was like the first kind of official serial killer
in American history,
right?
Yeah.
So not only that, there were fires. There was a huge fire that killed 16 people during that World's Fair in a cold storage building on the fairgrounds. And you and I were talking before this, right before the end of the fair, the mayor was assassinated. And I mean, just
yeah. I mean, parts of the story that you never realize until you start to dig into it. So we're going to talk a lot more about it, but as we always do when we go to break, we have a trivia question.
Yeah.
Johnny, what you got?
Yeah, so our trivia question actually takes us a little bit into the future here in 1939.
All right.
So there was a World's Fair in 1939. New York.
Yeah.
In the 1939 New York World's Fair is famous for introducing television to a mass audience in the United States.
Okay.
During the fair's opening ceremony, the first U.S. television broadcast was made. Who was the first person to appear on that broadcast?
A, B, or C?
Okay, so we have Franklin Roosevelt, Albert Einstein, or Walt Disney. It could be any of these guys, really, if you think about it, right? I mean,
it would make sense that it would be Franklin D. Roosevelt because every president all along the way wanted to be associated with the biggest event of the year in the USA. So I think Roosevelt makes a lot of sense, but sometimes, I'll just tell you, if you play along at home, John makes you think deeper than would otherwise. That would seem to be the obvious one.
It's not always obvious. I'll tell you this much.
Okay.
All three of them attended the fair.
Okay.
Yeah, so that I know for sure. Yeah.
I wonder how much of an influence it had on Walt Disney's plans, because that's 1939.
I think it had a lot.
And I mean, 1955, so 16 years later, he unveils Disneyland. Yeah, I think you got to be right. Okay, so who would it have been? Why don't I go for the only guy we haven't talked about yet? I think I'm going to say Albert Einstein.
Okay. So you think I'm throwing a red herring out there somewhere?
Red herring,
but this one's kind of interesting. And when we come back after the break, we'll actually go to the videotape because we actually have some great movie tone footage of the answer.
Movie Tone comes through for us every time.
They come through all the time. We got to thank our friends at Movie Tone. They're so awesome.
Right. So that's coming up. After a quick break. Okay. Stay with us on The Great American Story.
All right, welcome back to The Great American Story.
Yep.
Ron, we've started this YouTube poll question for every episode we do.
Yes.
We put a poll question up on YouTube, so check out our YouTube address there on screen and go answer one of our poll questions because we're having fun with it and we're getting a lot of response.
John, one of our more recent ones had to do with the next president whose face should be on Mount Rushmore, correct?
So our last poll question, which got a lot of response, was if there were to be another face added to Mount Rushmore, out of these four presidents, who would be the most deserving? Now, it's just four presidents. We're going to go to round two to a different four presidents. We're going to have kind of a face-off between but we had Donald Trump, we had Barack Obama, we had FDR, and we had Ronald Reagan.
Now, so the word on the street is that we had 10,000 YouTube votes just on that one poll question.
We're up to 12 as of this recording.
Wow.
So, and
this is great.
We're getting great comments too.
You know what, John and I, we sat around, we kind of brainstormed that we would do a show like this.
Yeah.
And the way you guys are embracing it and really becoming part of it, it just makes us smile. Matter of fact, you've been hearing from people with some of their opinions, right?
So right now, Donald Trump is leading. He's way out in front. But we have a lot of comments, and most of the comments are against Donald Trump. Strange, but we got some great comments, And Buck3656 said, Roosevelt led the country through some of the most difficult years we faced. Getting through the Great Depression and fighting and winning the Second World War on two fronts is a major accomplishment. Good point.
Yeah.
Motley Crew 345 says, where's Kennedy and Eisenhower? Hey, stay tuned. They may be in another poll question.
Okay.
Super Big Head 1973 said Reagan defeated the Soviet Socialist Union and made us superior to all in the strength of military power. So there's a vote for Reagan. And B3 and IP says everyone voting for Trump has never even looked into what FDR did for the country. Don't get me wrong. I don't hate Trump, but FDR is 10 times more deserving. So there's some good comments, really insightful, people thinking about it a little bit, you know?
I was driving across the South not long ago, and I saw the exit for Warm Springs, Georgia. And I didn't have time, and I wanted to go there to kind of pay homage to FDR.
Sure.
I thought to myself, he truly was the man to lead the country through the war and through the Great Depression.
Sure.
But I do think the pressure of the presidency killed him. I really do.
Yeah.
You know, I was just reading about James K. Polk. We need to do multiple episodes on James K. Polk. He had, by the time he left office, John, he had all these great plans. He was going home to Nashville, to Tennessee. And I think he was dead within 3 months.
No kidding.
The presidency killed him as well. The pressures in that job, especially in those days when you did almost everything. Now you've got a huge bureaucracy.
For sure.
Anyway,
just the travel alone, you got to figure was taxing on these people. I mean, they didn't have Air Force One back then. You know, it's horse and buggy, or you know, stagecoach, whatever.
Correct.
But yeah. So we're gonna do another poll question when this episode drops, and be sure to check it out. And we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna have a little face-off between presidents and see who comes out on top, and we'll have a different four on the next one.
Okay,
so,
that is excellent.
Hey, let's go back to our trivia question.
Yep, here we go.
You said Albert Einstein.
I did.
So the cool thing is we have videotape that answers this question. Our friends at Movie Tone come through again, and let's go to the tape, and you'll see who the answer is.
All who come to this World's Fair in New York and to the exposition in San Francisco will, I need not tell them, receive the heartiest of welcomes. They will find that the eyes of the United States are fixed on the future. Yes, our wagon is still hitched to a star, but it is a star of friendship, a star of progress for mankind, a star of greater happiness and less hardship, a star of international goodwill, and above all, a star of peace. May the months to come carry us forward in the rays of that eternal hope.
All right, so your first pick was right, right? You know, it was Roosevelt.
I do have a tendency to overthink these questions because I know you put a lot of effort into it.
Sometimes I throw a wrench in there, but you know what? It's kind of cool. Einstein actually did make a speech at that World's Fair, and we have video of that too. We won't. I can show clips of it, but we won't actually air the. But yeah, it was kind of cool hearing him talk and talk about that World's Fair. So, but getting back to we were in
Chicago World's Fair.
We were in Chicago, 1893. We were talking about the Devil in the White City, the book by Eric Larson. Highly recommend it. It's a great read if you're fascinated about World's Fairs. But we were talking about H.H. Holmes, the serial killer.
Okay.
You did some digging on this.
Okay, so he built a 3-story building in Chicago that then eventually became known as the Murder Castle.
Goodness.
And it had windowless rooms, hidden passageways, trap doors, soundproof chambers, and it was a house of horror. This guy, as you said, probably the first true serial killer in the United States.
Yeah.
And I mean, he had acid vats, and the guy was so creepy and so weird. But what he did was he took advantage of the throngs. I mean, we had 27 million people that came to that World's Fair in Chicago. And so, you know, at the time, there were just so many people that perhaps the police would have been overwhelmed and might not have noticed, particularly when you have a lot of younger people, a lot of younger women coming to Chicago. Those were the vast majority of his victims.
Right.
And not really knowing, oh, hey, somebody's missing. You know, it took a long time for them to add it up. But ultimately, John, he confessed to 27 murders.
Wow.
But they actually think that the annals of his crimes go much deeper than that, and we'll maybe never know the real number. But police there and investigators who've looked at it since believe his total number of victims could have been over 100, perhaps as many as 200.
Oh my goodness! I mean, imagine the fear that's struck in the people of Chicago. Now, they didn't have, the same mode of, communications back then, instant news, that kind of thing. But I got to believe that word did travel. And, there was some fear probably in the streets of Chicago back then.
You did say you read The Devil in the White City.
I did.
I'm going to put it on my list.
Yeah, it was a while ago, and I want to reread it because I think that I'll appreciate it a lot more having done a little bit of research on that. And, the thing about these World's Fairs, and what I discovered quickly, is that there were so many of them, Ron.
Yes. Yes.
If you go by how many were sanctioned and how many were not sanctioned, because there's actually a governing body that sanctioned the World's Fairs. Right. We're talking over 100, probably over 100 World's Fairs. And the reason I bring up the sanctioning is because the 1964 World's Fair in New York was an unsanctioned World's Fair. It was this huge event, right? Okay. I mean, massive.
Yes.
But it was technically not sanctioned by the World's Fair governing body.
Okay.
So, but anyway, getting back to how, there's so many of these, and there's so many of these stories that go into each of these World's Fairs, and so many things come out of them, and these the products that get introduced, and the innovation, and the cultural things that come out of this, and countries touting their industrial advances, and every World's Fair is unique to itself, right?
Yeah.
Not only in location, but in what it brought to society.
Sure.
And that really was what these were. These were coming out parties for innovation in industry for each part of the world.
In our next episode, we're actually going to talk about the World's Fair that happened in the 1970s in the smallest city to this day to ever host a World's Fair, and the one that I went to in Spokane. I mean, I was a high schooler at the time.
In Seattle, right?
Spokane.
Spokane.
1974, Expo 74.
Okay.
And my wife was in junior high at the time, and she danced in that one. And there were so many skeptics saying, you'll never be able, you're such a little town, even though it's a beautiful city up in the great Northwest, you'll never be able to pull it off. But they did pull it off, and with a great legacy.
Wow.
And so you're right. Every city, there certainly were benefits. And yet at the same time, just with you mentioning that the 1964 World's Fair in New York wasn't even sanctioned, and they're like, whatever.
Right, we're going to do it.
We're going to do it anyway. Yeah. It actually reminds me, I want to go back one more time to this great Chicago 1893 World's Fair. One of my favorite stories was what's sanctioned and what's not sanctioned. Well, Buffalo Bill wanted desperately to be in that World's Fair in Chicago. Wow. Did you know this?
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
But
okay. I mean, he was a great showman at the time. And so William F. Buffalo Bill Cody could not get in the fair. So he set up, I don't know where he got the land or whatever he did, if he bought it or rented it or whatever, but he set up probably his greatest ever Wild West show just outside the gates.
Of course he did. Of course he did.
And so, I mean, people, let's face it, they flocked to Chicago to see the White City and to see the incredible Ferris wheel. By the way, named after a Mr. Ferris. But second only to people going into the World's Fair, where the people were like, hold on, I think I want to go over there. And so visitors flocked to see Annie Oakley and the sharpshooting contest that they had, reenactment of frontier battles. And apparently it was such a success. That's where he made his fortune in life.
No kidding.
Was the unsanctioned Wild West Buffalo Bill Cody show just outside the gates. How about that?
That's, like I said, these stories that come out of these events are amazing.
Right.
Ron, I got to ask you this because So tell me, was there a Seattle World's Fair as
There was.
well as a Spokane World's Fair?
Yes, Seattle was in 1962.
62, okay.
Spokane was in 74.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
yeah.
See, I thought you went to the Seattle one, but
I went to the Space Needle.
Okay.
But it was after the fair. I was too young at that time to go to the fair.
Okay.
But I did go soon afterwards.
Okay.
And we'll never forget.
another enduring,
Yes.
iconic
Sure.
structure from
Yes.
a World's Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna have to catch up on part 2 of
Yeah,
our
man.
World's Fair.
And we got a lot of great stuff from our friends at Movie Tome for that episode
we do.
as
We've
well.
got some good stuff
Yeah.
coming up. So,
Okay.
look forward to our next episode on the World's Fair. We got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
And of course, we love your input as well. So thank you for watching this episode of The Great American Story. We'll be back with part 2 next week.